You need to take more risks and work harder than anyone else, but you need to do it strategically. You can't just grind your whole life long. Like, I've never worked as a software engineer or senior software engineer or team lead or anything. Direct CEO, no less. Okay. There were two people in the company, but I was the CEO. And I prefer to run my career more like an artist. Like, artists get completely consumed by the work while they're doing it.
Right.
And then they're like, when they're done. And then they know that they have to take a break before the inspiration starts. The psychology of work is like, if your bedroom and your workplace is the same place, you can never really switch off. Going to an office and coming back from an office, although that commute is painful, the fact is it creates a separation between the two areas. If you are excited by AI or you're very frightened, if your reaction to it is very extreme, you should probably quit your job and dive into AI. As they say, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. If you feel AI is your enemy, like, just go and understand it deeply. And Shaadi has only one problem, is that it's not growing like startups grow. Like, I've been an early stage guy, and you can't expect a company that's 20 years old to still show the kind of growth rates that are start. I'm sure almost everyone in India has had an account on shaadi.com that they didn't know about. Few of them know about it. Many of them know about it, but there are lots that, mommy just made one. When you're burnt out, you're vibrating at a very low frequency. And as you rest, as you reconnect with your joy, as you do things that energize you and the energy comes back, like, you vibrate differently. There is always a lot of pressure from the business and product to keep shipping. But it's the job of the engineering managers and engineering leadership to ensure that we ship in a sustainable way. When the team is running well, the manager actually has nothing to do. But the fact is that the team is doing great because they know you're there.
Hi, welcome to yet another episode of SCALER Pod. This is Arnav. And today we have with us Siddharth, more well known as SVS all over the internet. Thank you so much for coming here.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Been a fan of the pod for a while.
Thank you so much.
Nice to be here.
So I'll start off with a question that's sort of my favorite, because a lot of people give different answers based on what they're doing. A lot of people have been CTOs on the show. So different size companies, startups and big companies got very different answers. The question is what does your day look like? And especially you're on a sabbatical right now. So on a sabbatical, what does your day look like? How it's different from before?
Sure. Yeah. The great thing about sabbatical is it adds a lot of variability and you can say volatility to your life. So Every day is different. Some days I'm the good father, waking up early, getting the kid ready for school and having a really nice productive day where mostly, if I say work, it's mostly writing. I write the newsletter. I'm working on a little sabbatical handbook and journal entries to myself and all kinds of. I really enjoy writing, so I spend quite a bit of time writing. Otherwise, it could be anything: traveling, recording a podcast, or doing nothing, vegging out, playing a lot of chess, exercise. The basic rule is only do things that make you feel good. So that could be anything from time to time.
Are you tinkering with tech stuff also during this, or it's
Not really. I'm kind of taking a break from the whole tech thing. I'm a little bit obsessed with writing at the moment, so I'm just indulging that desire at the moment.
How did the newsletter come into being? I have read your older blogs, but this particularly the engineering org, where did the idea seed from?
Well, I found myself stuck in Dubai, and I was all alone there, and I didn't have. I'd left InVideo, so I had no gainful employment. And I also happened to get a very bad back spasm, so I couldn't, move around a lot.
Okay.
So all by myself, lying in bed, I was wondering what should I do. So I started to write, and then I found Substack. So I have had this Substack for a while, but I connected Stripe to it, and people started subscribing, and it started a dopamine cycle that frankly became pretty intense at one point. And I was writing 2 posts a week just because I really enjoyed, that satisfaction of people reading, commenting, subscribing,
right,
etc. And I also felt like I had a lot to say. It was a way for me to process the learnings from, it was quite a long time I've been doing quote unquote engineering management. And I had all this stuff in my head, and one way for me to leave it and enjoy my sabbatical was to put it down on paper and get it out of the system, like kind of synthesize the learnings into written form.
Right. No, so I'll delve a little deeper into especially the kind of things you were writing about on building orgs and navigating your way through orgs. Before we get there though, for the audience, I would love to just walk through once your tech career so far. Like, how did it start? What are the places you have been? What's been the experience so far?
It's always a little difficult to answer this question because I didn't have a very traditional entry into tech career. In fact, to jump ahead a little bit, I got paid for writing code for the first time at age 33.
Okay.
But I like to think of my career as having started the day the ZX Spectrum entered our house. For some reason, my dad got us a ZX Spectrum.
Okay.
Younger listeners of the podcast won't know what that is. It was actually a brilliant piece of engineering. It had 48 kilobytes of RAM, out of which 7 KB was video RAM and 41 KB was available at application layer. And the kind of games you could play on it were pretty cool. And it started a kind of lifelong love affair with computing in general. And I was just always in awe of this thing that they built. So much in awe of it and so much in love with programming that I neglected to study hard. And I got pretty poor grades in 12th standard, and I couldn't go to computer school.
Okay.
All my friends went to computer school. I went off to do a BCom, and then I entered my what I call my 7 years in the wilderness, like a vanvas. The whole MBA track was pretty. It was a detour for me, I would say. And the problem is, I got into IIM Bangalore, and I went to IIM Bangalore. Then I got a job in London, so I went to London, and it just kept bigger and bigger carrots just kept being put in front of me. But I reached London. I became an investment banker. I would wear a suit and go to work in this building full of sociopaths. And it took me no time at all to burn out. And one of the reasons I burnt out is because I was not aligned with the values of that whole scene. I'm not a banker by heart, I can safely say at this moment. And interesting thing is, a book came out about my time. Well, not about my time there, about the time there. It's called The Dark Towers, and it is like this litany of misdeeds and crimes, including crimes of all sorts. So I didn't like the vibe there. Also, I ended up in the nerdiest role I could find without being a PhD, which was asset-backed security structuring.
Okay.
And eventually the models became so complex that it was software development, but without any of the processes and safety nets of software development, such as version control, for example, or testing or any of those things. And beyond a point, a combination of these two things, I burnt out for the first time. I came back to India. I took a 3-year-long sabbatical. So I'm somewhat of an expert on sabbaticals.
Expert on sabbatical.
Yeah, somewhat of an expert. It was great. I did whatever I wanted to. I was a young man with no responsibilities and a recent career in banking. So there was no shortage of time or resources to have fun with. The funny thing is, 3 years later, the job I had left got outsourced to India.
Okay.
And in return for 3 years of doing whatever I wanted, I got some double promotion and got made global head of asset-backed structuring for the offshoring entity. It's really bizarre how the world works, and that's why I tell people who are going on sabbatical, don't worry so much. The world is too strange. It's
the world will figure something out. Yeah, you will figure something
out. Exactly. And then I went back to do that. And then around 2008, I felt too guilty about participating in the impending crash.
Right.
And it was quite clear by then that there's going to be a reckoning of sorts. Mm-hmm. And so to wash my sins, I joined what do I know? I know finance and I know programming. So I went to work in the microfinance industry.
Okay.
And we built a core banking system for microfinance.
Okay.
And that was the first time I got paid money to write code. Okay. At age 33.
Okay.
Since then, I've never worked as a software engineer or senior software engineer or team lead or anything. direct CEO, no less. Okay. There were 2 people in the company, but I was the CEO. And checking in code every day, writing the whole thing. And then that company grew to some 6 or 7 people. And the microfinance sector, essentially, at least the joint lending structure that whole business line, it went away because the regulation changed and whatnot. And so then I found myself as a freelancer, and I did a bunch of freelance projects. Then I ended up as a CTO of Imbibe. If you know, Imbibe was EdTech. It got acquired by Reliance a few years ago. The first time I run a team, a proper team in a proper startup with investors and whatnot. Then I quit to start my own company. It was a company called rBus.
Okay.
And its idea was to build a Smartbus network.
Okay.
Right. And I found the way we travel or commute, especially, to be quite barbaric in a sense. Right. Either you are struggling in supreme discomfort.
Yeah.
Or you are atomized in a car and, just by yourself for 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if we couldn't, build something a little more hippie, a little more communal, a little more anarchic, where, people are traveling to work together and forming communities as they do. And that was called rBus. That's why it was called rBus.
Okay.
And that was the first time, actually, I think I felt that I understood engineering. We built a pretty complex system. I was 3 engineers. And not only did we build the whole Smartbus network, but also Android app, iOS app, web app, vendor app, ops app, customer support, all of these systems, the whole thing. And in 3 engineers in 6 months built all of this.
Nice.
And I remember when we had 24 buses, it took 8 people to manage the operations of the day. But when we had 80 buses, it took 1 person to manage the ops of the day. Nice. And it was really a smart bus network. It could have scaled infinitely. And I understood so many things about networks, for example, right? When something has network effects, the more of it happens, the easier it is the easier things happen. Right. And that was amazing. But unfortunately for that company, I was the CEO. There should have been someone who was better at business and fundraising than me.
Right.
So we ran out of money. Actually, a lot of people suffered. Most of that cohort of companies eventually shut down. COVID took care of everyone else, including Shuttle, which was the big company in the space. And but it's a beautiful space. I wish the regulation was a little more comforting for investors. And
I mean, office commute and all, I have used obviously Shuttle for a small duration, but I felt like traveling to places like how London's bus network works in a way, right? I mean, we are lacking a lot in terms of that. Like, you're just
absolutely
pushing everybody to buy a car and travel because there's just no other way to commute.
Absolutely, it is barbaric in a sense. And it's preventing our cities from being child friendly, for example. My hero was this guy called Enrique Peñalosa.
Okay.
He was a mayor of Bogota. And Bogota used to be like, it's Colombia.
Yeah.
So drug cartels and a lot of gang crime and whatnot, super unsafe. And he comes in and he just pedestrianizes everything, puts in buses and cleans up, and the whole thing cleans up.
Right.
And he says, just like in a stream in a jungle or forest, the presence of salmon is the sign that it is healthy.
Yeah.
It means the whole ecosystem below it is clean. And for a city, it is the presence of children on the streets.
Absolutely.
And I found that so meaningful to myself personally as a goal to achieve,
right,
that there was just no way I could not work on this. So when the funding environment became such that you could get funded for an idea like this, I jumped at it. It was really good fun to do that.
Yeah. I think that's a very nice perspective to look at it, because I have seen the same thing. Like most of my travels, especially to the European cities, is like there's so many people with just prams and kids inside it. I mean, once I was saying, like, a lot of people have very young kids, and I was like, no, it's just that it's visible. Like in India, like if you have
Yeah.
kids at that age, you just don't get out of
Yeah,
home.
sure. They're always in some bubble or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other.
yeah.
And but I'm hopeful now seeing some of the stuff that's happening in Indian cities. Like Pune has really nice walking infrastructure now. Mumbai has started to have nice walking infrastructure now, and we'll see. Haven't seen much of
Public commute
Bangalore
has
now.
always been like Mumbai has been sort of the shining beacon in that sense. I guess I would say.
Yeah, in a sense. And now the metros come and Metro L coming, and yeah, no, that shining beacon local train was another form of suffering. Yeah, yeah, but it's getting better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then after that, Shadi.com happened.
Yes, Anupam Mittal happened to be an investor
Okay.
in Limo, and so even though we burnt his money, he appeared to like the manner in which we'd done it.
Okay.
So that was a pretty challenging time for me. I was 42 years old. I was broke, and I was punting around Mumbai, which is not a great tech city, as a kind of freelance CTO. And I was working with one startup or another, and it was quite stressful. And Anupam kind of threw me a lifeline, though we never talk about it in those terms. And a co-founder of mine in Limo had already gone in rBus, had already gone to Shadi. And then Anupam called me, and we started with a consulting contract to see, how it is. And after a few months, he invited me to be the CTO. And I very gladly accepted, because by that time I'd kind of started to really appreciate the scale at which that company operated, and the amount that I had to learn from working at that scale, where mistakes are costly. All my life before then, it was, mistakes are cheap. Like almost no one's using your product, and you can easily recover. You know all the users personally. You can phone them and apologize, and everything will be fine. But at that scale, mistakes are expensive. Like it costs real money to do a bad deploy. And also, alternatively, the biggest team I'd worked in was like 7 people, and now I found myself leading a team of 125 people.
Right.
And it took me a few months just to learn everyone's name, and it was bewildering and overwhelming in a way that I think forced me to deconstruct what is going on. That's where all of this engineering org comes from, is because I just got thrown in the deep end.
Right.
And I had to learn to swim before I drowned. And one day I came upon this idea, which has since then proved remarkably resilient. And the idea is that the organization is a computer.
Okay.
And management is programming.
Right.
Right. And but it's a pretty weird sort of computer, right? You can think of it not more like a distributed system, but a distributed system where everyone's running a slightly different version of the software, right? And all the APIs have slightly different semantics. So you can say the same thing to 2 people, but they will not. And there's a very low signal to noise ratio.
Right.
Like things get noisy and the message that is received is... So now the challenge becomes, if you are to program such an environment, what sort of systems and processes do you need to bring into place? And I found remarkably that a number of concepts from how we architect software systems can be like applied wholesale to...
how the org is designed.
Yes. And kind of that's what I talk about in my newsletter.
Yeah. And I think it would also have been sort of, I would say, interesting or plus challenging, because Shadi.com is like one of the very old crop of tech companies in India, like back from, I think, 2000s days.
Yes, the turn of the millennium.
.com boom kind of era.
Indeed.
And the other thing also is, I feel, I mean, there are a lot of other tech companies back from that time, but this is also very deeply entrenched with our way of life, right?
Indeed. And the thing is, it was a remarkable feat of entrepreneurship, because Shadi's original market was all in the USA.
Okay.
So if you can imagine at that time trying to set up a payment gateway that would do payments in USA and in India and so on and so forth. it was quite a remarkable setup. And number of people you meet who have, I remember this one story of a lady who said that, a very touching story. She said that she has this nephew and niece, and the parents both died in a car crash.
Oh.
And both the nephew and niece, she got them educated, she sent them to USA and all. Now her big problem was
Getting them married.
Right. And then Shadi.com to the rescue, right? So when she met me, she's like, you work for Shadi.com? Like, I owe that company so much. If it were not for them, now both my nephew and niece are well settled in good marriage. This was ages ago, but you can imagine the kind of, like, getting married is such a big thing, especially for our parents' generation. Like, it was their one goal that after they get you married, then their responsibilities are over and all of that. So yeah, it is very deeply embedded in our way of life, and it helped a lot of people deal with the fact that suddenly there's diaspora. Kids don't live in the hometown where they grew up with their parents. They've left not only the clan and community, they left the country. Saat samundar paar chale gaye, have now what to do. And so it was, it played an important role.
I think what Shadi does is also changed with how our society has changed. Like I've heard from some friends and all. I mean, it's I think very popular with people who have moved out of India. I think that's a crowd it's very popular with, and I think they have like really great experiences for like parents making accounts for kids versus kids making accounts for themselves.
Yes.
There's a lot of user experience you need to.
Yes. I'm sure almost everyone in India has had an account on Shadi.com that they didn't know about. Few of them know about it. Many of them know about it, but there are lots that, mommy just made one.
And then, how was the experience building video at InVideo? I think video editing. I really like that product. For example, like I think if you remember, I talked about like Canva for video probably, because I do sometimes amateur video editing, and I feel I like that app really a lot.
Yeah. InVideo came about quite interestingly because I, after 2.5 years at Shadi, we dealt with a lot of technical debt, rewrote a lot of core systems, and team was nicely seasoned, and I started. Shadi has only one problem, is that it's not growing like startups grow. Like, I've been an early stage guy, and you can't expect a company that's 20 years old to still show the kind of growth rates that start, right? And I was hungry for that kind of growth, so I said it's time to go to an early stage company again. And I had the criteria. It was around Series B, I said, and should be solving a hard tech problem.
Yeah.
Because after running rBus with a huge ops component, and actually being kind of responsible for the physical safety of people.
Right.
Like if the bus breaks down and it's raining and all of that, you are responsible for the safety of all those people, how the drivers behave, how they drive, etc. All of this is a huge operational component. And after that, it was very relaxing at Shadi.com because it's just a few pages on the internet, right? And it was so nice. So I said it should be a hard tech problem, no ops component, and Series B-ish, which is, starting that
the growth
journey, which is where I felt that I would be most useful. And based in Mumbai. And then I meet InVideo, which ticks all of these boxes. And not only that, not only are they based in Mumbai, but one of the co-founders lived in the same housing society as me.
Oh, nice.
So I took that as a sign from God that this is the company you need to go to. And I went there, and it was phenomenal because the kind of stuff we're trying to make the browser do.
Yeah, I mean, like bringing something like Premiere Pro kind of stuff, doing it on the browser, I think.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I've mostly of my life worked on client-side stuff, and for a client engineering junkie like me, like this just feels absolutely like brilliant. Like what people are these days being able to achieve inside the browser, that was already hard doing on desktop apps. Before.
Yes, absolutely. And then the addition of the network raises a lot of issues when it comes to handling media, right? And not only that, the formats that are easily playable by the browser are often not well suited to editing work.
Right.
The kind of seeking that happens in H.264 format is not really
Not keyframe based seeking. That's problematic for linear editing and all.
Exactly. And so all of these, like you're trying to make it do something that it was not designed to do. And at the same time, video was exploding. Like platforms like Insta were saying, please don't post photos anymore. If it's a video, we'll give it some love. Otherwise, and the demand for this was just going crazy. And it was actually the main problem was figuring out which market to attack.
Right.
And of course, there were technical challenges because the whole space was growing at such a rate. It was bewildering to try and understand what product to really go with. But so we concentrated a lot on building our capabilities. The funny thing is the browser has become so amazing that you can get very far without using video. Like CSS animations, text, HTML5 video and audio. Like you can kind of give the appearance or fake it like it's a video. And that was like version 1 of InVideo.
Right.
But then we moved everything to the canvas, WebGL.
Yeah.
And then you get like everything, like the shaders and the dissolves and.
But then you also have to draw every pixel by hand.
Yes. And it does get extremely complicated. And there, I didn't get very much into the tech. One thing I learned at Shadi, which was such a sprawling code base, 20-year-old code base, is how to run an org without getting into the tech. There are people who know the tech, and then there's me who's kind of making sure that everyone's working on the right things in the right way. And so at InVideo also, I put together a team that works really well.
Right.
Experts, really good programmers. Like when the slowdown started, it was quite obvious that everyone that InVideo needed to reduce the size of the team. And I felt that was a good time for me to to head off on sabbatical because it had been like 12 years working nonstop on startups.
Right.
And I was like, I'm ready to, take some time off and rejuvenate, recuperate, whatever.
Right. And recently you were on that Twitter space where people were asking like, when should I take a sabbatical? And I think somebody fairly young, I think 3-4 years in the career, they were asking that. And I'd like you to expand a little bit more on this whole thought process as well, because in our industry, I mean, burnout is something that happens often. Working in a startup and building a tech product requires something sometimes to move mountains, and you're doing that for 6 months, and burnout obviously does happen. And especially like for the audience, a lot of people might be like, a few years into their career, maybe 5-6 years into their careers and all. Like, how do you like have even a burnout radar maybe in your head, or like how do you start detecting like this is a point of burnout where it can affect me long term? Maybe I should slow down. Maybe I should go for a sabbatical. How do you sort of calibrate that? Also asking a question from a very personal angle as well. Like I think the early days of my career, I don't think I would ever realize what burnout is. Like it's like taking a 5-ton truck and moving it 200 kph, and and when things don't work, you just feel like, okay, I will just sleep a little late today and I will wake up even earlier tomorrow and I'll just make it work. Right?
Yes.
So how do you sort of, what's the point in career where you start actually seriously thinking about effects of burnout? How do you start detecting that's happening in that sense?
Sure. Before I answer that question, I just want to say one thing is that the working environment has changed entirely, right? When I started my career, it was still impossible to reach you after you left the office. Whatever work happened in that chair at that desk, with, the CRT monitors and CPU on the floor and everything. If you were not at that desk, you could not work. And in 1998, mobile phones were still quite new. So if you left the office, that's it, you were gone, right? And work couldn't follow you around wherever you went. And that changed.
Pings on
Yes. That changed slowly at first. You got the mobile phones first, and then your boss got your mobile number, and then they could call you and ask you, questions about work. And then laptops became, handed out to people so you could carry work home. Then high-speed internet came home, and all of this was happening. And then COVID, work from home, and every barrier and separation between work and life kind of dissolved. Like work was now everywhere. And I think, I don't know what it's like in the West, but I'm sure in India, I'm sure like this is quite the story for techies, especially. And the issue with that is that the psychology of work is like if your bedroom and your workplace is the same place, you can never really switch off.
Yeah.
And going to an office and coming back from an office, although that commute is painful, the fact is it creates a separation between the two areas. So your relaxation area actually allows for relaxation. And so I just want to tell the audience that if you're burnt out, it's not because you're weak or because you're lazy or there's something wrong with you. It's like the situation, and especially through COVID, has been very, very difficult on people. And to answer your question, how to recognize burnout, in general, I feel that people should get better at listening to their bodies. It's a core skill now, because the environment we work in doesn't do that for us. Yeah. It doesn't tell us that, okay, now stop working, or now go to sleep, or now take a holiday. Like our parents' generation would get vacation, where once they were on vacation, they couldn't work.
Yeah.
Now we go on vacation and we are checking our phones 20 times a day, and responding and whatnot. So the environment has stopped, supporting us in kind of the balance that you need as a human. So we are going to have to do it for ourselves. And one of the first tools in that is to be able to listen to your body.
Right.
And I don't want to tell anyone that they're burnt out when they're not. And I don't want to tell anyone to go on sabbatical when it may not, sabbatical is not a silver bullet for the problems in your life. But when you're burnt out, it is important to rest. This is all I'm saying. Right. And burnout, by the time you realize it is burnout, it's already burnout. You're already burnt out, right? And the first one will be like this. Everyone, if you're going to burn out, the first one is going to be like a comprehensive one.
Yeah.
Like what happened with me in banking. Like I would sit in front of the computer at 10 a.m. I would get to office and I could not do anything till 5 p.m. I could not do anything. And later I figured it's because the neural circuitry in my brain was fried. There's no dopamine, there's no emotional engagement, there's nothing. And so there is no motive. There is no impetus to do anything.
Right.
And if you're here, you're burnt out, nothing will fix this except rest.
Yeah, that's like hitting a wall kind of burnout.
Yeah, you're at the wall. As time goes by, you get better and better at understanding when you're burnt out. And I prefer to run my career more like an artist. Artists get completely consumed by the work while they're doing it.
Right.
And then they're when they're done, and then they know that they have to take a break before the inspiration starts, finding them again. And I feel also today, if you want to build a remarkable career, you need to take more risks and work harder than anyone else, but you need to do it strategically. You can't just grind your whole life long.
Right.
So opportunistically, you might need to put in 3, 4, 5, 7 years to build something remarkable, but you cannot sustain that pace over and over again.
Right.
And given that failure rates of startups, you might need to do this 3, 4 times before you build something remarkable. And if you want to build your career like this, then taking breaks between those outings is quite logical also, in a sense. It makes each subsequent outing that much more intentional, that much more energetic. So
Right. And then the probably converse of the question is if you are on a break, you've taken a break, and I'll probably ask you a little bit more about what you should do on the break because you're writing a sabbatical handbook. But when you are on a break, how do you decide when it's time to go back though? Is it some idea comes and some opportunity suddenly drops and you feel okay, I'm done, I need to get working back again? Is it that's the spark that you should wait for?
Yeah, you will know.
You will know.
If you have done your sabbatical correctly, you will start to feel more energy, which manifests as happiness, positivity, whatever. And if you're just doing things that give you more of that, you will meet people who are aligned with whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing next.
Right.
this is getting into the theory and framework of sabbatical. But essentially what happens is that when you're burnt out, you're vibrating at a very like low frequency.
Right.
Like it's like the life has left you, right? And as you rest, as you reconnect with your joy, as you do things that energize you and the energy comes back, like you vibrate differently.
Yeah.
Right. And then the kind of activities that you get up to, the kind of people you meet tend to resonate much better with you. And somewhere on this journey, you will find someone doing something that you are more than happy to be part of.
Right.
And you will just organically exit from there. This is a perfect sabbatical, right? But there are always like no two sabbaticals are the same.
Right.
In my experience, there comes a time, our Indian middle class conditioning is so strong that we cannot be on sabbatical forever.
Yeah, I think that's something I've seen with sometimes friends trying to take a break, but they end up time boxing the break. Then the break does not feel like a break.
Yeah.
Because I have a 6-month break. Within that, I have to interview, and then and it feels
Yes.
like, buddy, you're more stressed than you were at work.
Yes. Because the anxiety and one of the analogies I give is that people say life is not a sprint; it's a marathon, right? I say it's neither of these, right? The thing is, with a sprint and marathon, sooner it ends, the better it was, right?
Yeah.
But that's not true of life, first of all. So the analogy fails at that level. And the second thing is neither a sprint nor a marathon go anywhere meaningful. The only meaningful thing about a sprint is that the ending is 100 meters away from the beginning. And same for marathon. So I like to think of life more as a trek, right? You choose a destination that is meaningful to you, and it is a journey. And it's a journey that is designed to stretch your capabilities and to give you a feeling of fulfillment when you finish it. And there is no trek that doesn't involve rest as a part of his journey. And now if a trekker were to stop for the night, and then they were pacing up and down in the lodge, and you ask them, why are you doing that? They're like, no, we are here to walk, so I'm walking. It's absurd, right? But a lot of people on sabbatical don't give themselves permission to rest.
Right.
Like to really do the things that are meant to be done so that they are recovered for the next outing. And so this is why I'm writing the book, is essentially to give people permission that when you're resting, just rest.
Yeah.
That's
if you're resting, you're thinking of what I will do after the rest, then you're not really resting in that sense.
There are a lot of psychological issues here at work that need to be addressed if you're going to do the sabbatical. And when I say need to be addressed, it's just someone needs to say those 10 things to you, and then you know what to watch out for, and then you go and do it with the...
Right. The other thing I just sort of would want, what would be your sort of advice also for engineers right now, mid-career? I have seen one thing is that you do get, burnout could lead to burnout because of a lot of different factors, but a lot of times it's because your operating procedure at work. If things get blocked, how to get things unblocked? You're probably very hyper competitive peers, bunch of those things. Also about execution and operational things like maybe the code review process, the way it works, it gives you a lot of stress at work, those kind of things. Any piece of advice around how do you operate like as an engineer or an engineering manager, which sort of even prevents that burnout to happen too fast, right?
Yes. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day, and she said that burnout is the result of an inability to rest properly. And there's a lot of psychology behind that, but I found that quite interesting. And so there are things that you can do, which the corollary of what she said is that there are things that you can do which remove this burnout. And even in these situations which don't naturally support them.
Right.
One of the core tenets of engineering for me is that it should feel good. Right. And where this comes from is like from really being in awe of the systems that these people built. Right. When you look at x86 architecture and subsequently it's it's beautiful. Right. And then you look at TCP/IP stack and it is beautiful. Like think about it, The thing has scaled to 1 trillion times what its original network size was, and it's still robust.
Yeah.
Right? That engineering is amazing, and you think of this feeling that you get when you think about it, and then you look at your code, and you think the feeling that happens when you're looking at the code base in your company. The two are like, this is so beautiful, and that is so... Right? So my whole management philosophy has just been that how do I maintain this feeling while I'm working on my company's code? The thing is, engineers are too willing to suffer. And they don't demand better working conditions. For example, simple thing, DevX, right? The compilation time of your JavaScript bundle is 8 seconds. It's a pain. But devs will just put up with it. And I know what happens when you go with compilation time from 8 seconds to like a few milliseconds. It just completely changes the nature of the output.
Yes. It does. That's the first thing I did when I was at Zomato. DP had asked me that, and his perspective was from somebody who wants to see changes quickly. It's like, I go and sit with the developer and I say that, move this button here or something. He will say it will take 2 minutes to build. I will get impatient. What will I do with those 2 minutes, right? And I'm sure a PM to dev cycle is slow because of this. Now automatically the steady state equilibrium, if the build time is 2 minutes, is that people will send a sketch document, or I think Figma was not popular back then, whatever we were making of PSD or a sketch document, and then it is done and you tell me tomorrow. Versus how about if this build time is 1 second?
Right.
Then the two can sit together and hey, move it there, okay, move it a little bit there, now it looks perfect. That's possible to do.
Yes.
It's not even possible if it is 5 minutes to build.
Correct.
And we brought it down from 5 minutes to around 5 seconds. And it changed that. It just changes the whole way things are getting built.
Yes. So those flow states become possible now suddenly when your feedback loops are so fast.
Yeah.
And the essence of a well-engineered system is that it is a pleasure to work on. According to me, this is it. Pleasure is, I don't know what you want to call it, hedonistic engineering or something like that. But pleasure is the guiding principle of it. Because for me, the experience of programming has always been pleasurable. Right. And so in a professional situation, when I'm put in a situation where it's not pleasurable, it's my first thing to make it pleasurable first.
Right.
And there is always a lot of pressure from the business and product to keep shipping. But it's the job of the engineering managers and engineering leadership to ensure that we ship in a sustainable way.
Right.
And this tension between the short term and the long term is essentially the core of negotiation between inside the company.
Right.
And you need a reasonable representation on both points of view. Otherwise, you end up in a mess of technical debt. You end up with distrust between product and engineering. Like these situations are quite common.
Right. And to that point, I think I'll also probably add. Sometimes I felt even changing something at a very personal level, not for the team, but at a very personal level. Let's say breaking down the task to a smaller tasks. They sometimes, while doing the same work, I feel more energetic, and because you break one task into 5 and every time you do it, you tick something off. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. With a larger task, something that will take 3 days to build, 3 days to make, I think for the first 2 days you're going to be going to sleep thinking that something is not done. While you break it down into 5 tasks, you go to sleep every day thinking at least 1 or 2 things are done. I think those things also help a lot, and this might feel extremely trivial, whether a Jira story is big or small.
Yeah, sure.
What does it change? What does it change is probably have a team of 10 people, and these 10 people spending 50, 60 hours a week. They're spending it either in a very burnt out way or they're feeling it in a very accomplished way.
Yes.
Because
the dopamine hits.
The dopamine hits, and you need to I think you need to engineer that to a degree.
Yeah, sure.
To make sure that happens.
Absolutely. And it is very, very much dependent on starting conditions. This company culture and engineering culture is very dependent on starting conditions. And to shift a team from a toxic work style to a more healthy, sustainable, and eventually productive, because the thing is, we are not doing this to geek out or nerd out, right? Like, we are doing this so that we can build a business and earn money and, do that thing. So, but it requires that balance between the short term that users are asking for this, let's give it to them, and the longer term that, because entropy will eventually catch up with you, your velocity will slide to zero, and you're going to have to pay the cost at some point.
Right.
And talking about that small task thing, the way the team at rBus used to work was entirely the opposite of that, right? And I'm telling this because the main thing is that everything is super contextual.
Yeah.
It depends on the size of the company, it depends on the team dynamics, it depends on the stage, etc., etc. At rBus, the team would, there were 3 engineers, 3.5 you can say, and they would spend all of Monday and Tuesday whiteboarding, and they won't start programming till Wednesday morning.
Right.
And they would release on Friday evening, and that was the week done. Right. And they would just do this, bang, 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 bang. And the thing is, because they do it together, like every engineer had all the context.
Right.
Everyone was automatically a full stack developer. It was quite anarchistic in the sense that whatever needed to be done was put up on a board. Mm-hmm. Like after 2 days, like people say sprint planning meeting should be like, should we budget 1 hour or 2 hours? I'm like, take a whole day. And they're like, a whole day for sprint planning? And I'm like, it's not just that you're splitting it into tasks. You're also going to be talking about the problem and getting context from a lot of people. And this I learned from the way we did it at rBus, is that just the amount of talking that you do together about a problem eventually means that the solution becomes just trivial. Right. Bang. Right. And so that was really a different way of doing things. But it just felt so organic, so natural. Like the team arrived at this through its own experimentation with different modes of working. Right. And I think that's essentially the lesson here, is that the team should be allowed to work in the way that makes itself the most productive.
Right. I've seen that what you're saying. I mean, I've seen teams where people are coming in a couple of days to work, and on those days, they probably are not opening the laptop at all. They're just mostly on a whiteboard. And then when people have figured out what they want to work, then for 3 days they're not coming to office. Like all 4 or 5 people in the team, they're at home. They're like, I know what I have to do.
Yes.
I know the other guy is doing exactly what he's supposed to do. And then for 5 days I will be at home. Yes. You'll probably putting in 10 hours, 12 hours maybe in the day. I don't want to commute to office. We'll do it. And when this phase is done, we'll be back and we will sort of exchange notes and think of the next thing to build and all of that. But I think it's also about the team figuring out what's the best frequency.
Yes. As I said, like pleasure-driven development. I can't tell you what is pleasurable for you. Right. You have to figure it out. So one of the lessons I learned, that what I was saying, the organization is a computer, right? And is this program to interfaces, not to implementations.
Right.
So when I talk to a team, I say, what I need from you is information in this format.
Right.
How you work, I don't care. What is the actual implementation of your workflow is something I leave to you. As long as you can report in this interface, I'm good. I wouldn't even tell people which issue tracking system to use, which style of Kanban, Scrum, whatever. None of this was mandated across the company.
Right.
So you use whatever works for you. I need you to periodically tell me in this format what is going on. And then, of course, the one-on-ones and all of that would also happen. But what happens then is that you get a variety of solutions. Eventually, the org refactors to the best solution. Like they'll see another team working better. They're like, okay.
Right.
That's good. So you take all of these various implementations and then you refactor them into something that works for the whole org.
I've read your post about this managing without managers. Right. That's also nice, and I have been in phases in places where fairly large teams also, you don't really have a designated engineering manager kind of a thing, but teams are being represented by whoever is the adult in the room of that team, to wherever it needs to be represented, to the CEO, to whatever. But the team does not have a concept of a manager, and still they are sort of delivering well. I though haven't seen at least the journey of a team organically reaching that place. If you sort of want to allow a team to reach a place where very organically teams are working, managing themselves without managers, what kind of things do you need to enable to the team to make give them at least a environment where they can reach that place?
Yeah, so the word manager is very heavily overloaded, and when you say manager, you can think of many things. You can think of a Dilbert style manager who's there to lay down the company line and make sure everybody conforms to it. Or if you look at the office
line manager from back in the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. But engineering management is and like the whole Taylorian management school, which is time and motion studies and all of this stuff that grew out of the Industrial Revolution, when you were trying to make humans work with the machine, so they had to kind of work like a machine as well. All of this has kind of seeped into everything. And another very important role the manager used to play was the role of communication.
Right.
When communication was very expensive, getting the message to everybody in the company would necessarily have to flow through the management hierarchy. Memos would be sent.
Correct.
And then further memos would be sent, and further memos would be sent. And that's how the company got the message across. Neither of these are really required anymore. Right? Engineering management yes, it is industrial, but it is also artisanal in a sense. The things that we do it by hand. And it runs in an industrial context, but it is a craft almost, right? And there is an element of creativity in it, because the output is not 10,000 tons of steel. The output is some change in the world, some reduction in information entropy, you can say, right? And this has nothing to do with the number of lines of code that you write. Nurturing this creativity is part of the job of engineering management. This is new. It's never been the role of a manager to nurture creativity, for example. And these are some of the things that the more progressive companies are figuring out. If you read Rework and all.
Rework is a great book, of course.
Yeah. So they're like, just give people the context, leave them to do their work. Now the role of manager has become one of caretaker almost, right? As a junior especially, you need certain things.
Right.
You need mentoring. You need a feeling of safety. You need upskilling where it is required. And you need all of these things. Providing this is someone's job.
Right.
And I would say that is the manager's job. It's providing this environment in which you can grow, be productive, and return something to the company or do the job that you're supposed to do. So manager, far from being laying down the law police, right, is now a kind of facilitator in a sense, right? And who makes the best facilitators? That's who should be the manager. There is no real requirement to manage anything, really, because it is quite obvious what needs to be done. If you have to build an app, much of what needs to be done is quite obvious. This is just engineering, right? So what is the management part in engineering management? There is building an app is engineering. So what is the remaining management part? It is all of this stuff. Managing people's leaves, managing their psychological state, making sure they get paid on time. Sometimes that's a thing. Making sure they get promoted so that they stay, doing their performance appraisals, giving them the feedback that they need to do better. All of these things, they're not even difficult. They're not. You don't need a management theory anymore. You just really need to care about the people you work with.
Right.
And then you will do what you need to make sure that they are looked after, that they have the information, the guidance, and the support from the company around them that they need. And I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, that's fine. I mean, but I think I got a different answer, but a better answer. What I've though noticed is that something that does happen, especially like a lot of startups recently, last few years, did grow. By growing, I mean business grew, but a lot of times teams also grew. Maybe sometimes justified, maybe sometimes unjustified, but nevertheless the teams grew. And you do it over a very short period of time. The sort of, I would say, organic end state has many times been that you have a team of maybe 2 people working on an app, and like 2 people, nobody's managing nobody, right? It's obvious.
Yes.
There are obvious state. And you're like, okay, we need to ship 10 features a day, 20 features a day, 30 features a day, and slowly you end up with a team of 10 people, right? And then the way a lot of these orgs, like, it's not like somebody deliberately makes it happen this way, but what organically happens is the person who has been in the team from the oldest, and the person who is sort of pulling the most weight in terms of writing code and shipping things, they sort of automatically are the app guy. Is the Android guy, right? Is the iOS guy. Like, if you need anything, you'll talk to him. That's what we were saying, right? The managers were required for the information architecture, right? Now you see that here, the information architecture, that person becomes the nodal point for the information architecture, and as a reason, de facto, they become the manager of the team.
Yes.
In a sense. So you want stuff done by the iOS team. So you're like, this is the iOS guy. You tell him, and like, you get it done by the rest of the team.
Right.
So even though there is no real ever any communication that, hey, congratulations, you're a manager now. It's not like that, but he is the manager now.
Everybody knows it.
Everybody knows that he's the manager. He's the lead of the team. So like, who is a like engineering lead, engineering manager? Those terms get a bit cloudy, and there's this person who is running the team.
Right.
One thing I've seen is that sometimes that also creates a bit of basically going back to like what kind of things that cause burnout in that sense. And I've had personally like a couple of close friends who have been in that exact spot where they have had to like grow their team because of the needs and the vagaries of the organization, and they have started slowly seeing that their role starts including communicating things from other parts of the org to their team. And then like their team needs certain things, like who will they talk to, like the person who hired you, right? So whether or not they are officially called an engineering manager, is like, this is the senior engineer in the iOS team, they have hired me, I'll go, can I take a leave, I want to go to a conference, can I get a ticket for that, and all of that, right? So you become an engineering manager in that sense. But then a lot of people have not really stopped, like, let's say, probably also shipping the maximum amount of code for their team, because they are the one who has the maximum context.
Now. Yes.
There's their identity. And they are in a way the architect of the entire whatever thing they're building, the back end, the front end, the web, or whatever they're building. They're the architect of that team because they're the ones who shipped the entire code. And if any of those people in the team, they need context on some part that they have not worked on, again, they go to that same person.
Correct.
Another person, the person starts feeling like, either like, I don't want to manage, like, I just want to, like, give me my tasks, I want to code, and I don't want to manage. Or sometimes what happens is, like, they do like the sort of managerial parts of it as well, but they feel burnt out because then, like, by 9 to 5, they are all just doing communication architecture. That's what they're just a node. They're like a modem inside a...
And their tasks become very, like, there's so
too
many
much context switching,
no flow state.
Exactly, there's no flow state. So 9 to 5, they probably are like jacked up with meetings, their entire calendar.
Meetings. Correct.
And then so much context switching. And like 7 p.m, they're like having a quick supper and then taking out their laptop. Now I will do the stuff the problems that I have to solve.
Comfort zone, yes.
Comfort zone.
Yeah.
Which means like they are sort of they are clocking in at 9 because the first stand up also they have to start.
Yes.
And then 7 to maybe 12, 1, they are sitting and working on something that they needed the flow state for.
Yes.
And that obviously will lead to burnout.
Yes.
Right. So, I'd say, I'd ask 2 things, A and B to you. One is like, as an org, how do you sort of, like if you're an engineering lead, if you're CTO, you see stuff like this happening, how do you even probably discover stuff like this happening? How do you prevent stuff like that? And then B is probably the person who is stuck in this kind of situation. What would you have an advice for that person? Because for them, their sort of career is dangling by a thread at that point.
Yes. Sure, this is a very challenging inflection point in a career, the one where you first take on managerial responsibilities, and kind of the mature orgs. That's why they have the career ladder. right? Before you're an engineering manager, you're a team lead. So you get some, EM with training wheels on, and then you become this thing. Even so, the point at which your programming is actually a net drag on the team comes as a shock to people. Not only am I not getting to program, it's that when I do program, it slows the team down.
Yes.
So I can't even do it anymore, even to relax. Here, you're right, there are two things that need to happen. One is the org needs to be cognizant of this,
Yes.
and the person needs to be cognizant of this. In general, the answer still remains the same. Like if you look at it logically, when I was turning out this much code every day, I felt amazing. And now my team, quote unquote, is churning out this much code every day, but it feels terrible. Why?
Yeah.
Why doesn't it feel great for me to be responsible for so much code being written? 10x more than what I could do, right? It doesn't feel great because there are a lot of psychological reasons for it, especially around identity and worth.
I am not writing it, right? That's the first thing that
right.
happens.
So letting go of that is what people need the most help with, right? And then they say if somebody else does it, they're going to screw it up.
Yeah.
Right? Reviewing other people's code is...
I think as an engineer, you are by default a control freak.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And everything...
I still have that problem oftentimes. Maybe just let it be, I will write it. But then I know that probably that will slow down things even more.
Yes. So this is the essential skill that you need, that the org needs to teach the new engineering manager, and which the EM needs to be aware of, is what do I need to do to let go of this identity of mine? Once you let go of that identity as being the iOS or the guy who wrote the app or whatever, then you can start to take pleasure in the fact that your words or the people in your care, your teammates are delivering this. And then the praise that they receive starts to feel like praise that you receive. At this point, you can relax a little bit and then be the manager, so to speak. And then whatever code you write. And so when I talk to people who are going through this, I say, yeah, you can code, but please remember that coding is your refuge and your escape into your comfort zone. It's there to help you recover and take on the next day's challenges as a manager. It's not necessarily there for you to ship a feature.
Yeah, I mean, when I have been in that zone, I felt like coding was like my daily sabbatical in that sense.
Exactly.
Did it to make me feel good rather than to actually solve any.
Yes. And so there is also very deeply ingrained idea, especially in India, is that work somehow involves suffering. And so for you to just take credit for work that someone else has done is a little...
morally repressive.
It feels wrong because you've not
suffered viscerally along with them.
Exactly, right? And so there is this sort of distrust of yourself, is that what am I even doing, right? Because when the team is running well, a manager actually has nothing to do.
Yeah,
right.
That's imposter syndrome also.
Yes. You're like, I'm not even doing anything. They are doing all the work. I'm useless. I should never have taken up this career, etc. All of these thoughts start to this thing. But the fact is that the team is doing great because they know you're there, right? If you were to suddenly disappear and the team were to have no one with whom to go to questions to, or no one to break a tie or whatever, and even though you're only dealing with exceptions now, so to speak, it's super important that you are there.
Right.
It gives that sort of safety and air cover to the team to continue to do what it's doing. But yeah, it is a challenging psychological transition. And I'm certain that especially a company like SCALER, I feel, is very, very well positioned to address this through training and coaching in general.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we see a lot of people come in. I mean, when SCALER started off, of course, the people coming in were 2 years, 3 years experienced, looking to sort of be in a more, I would say, slavery-oriented setup. Some companies like that, just clocking in, clocking out. You're writing code, but you're not really building things. And then to get into a place where you'd be actually doing some impactful work. That was like the core set of people who just started off with. 3 years down the line now, there's a lot of people who come in who are 10 years experienced, 15 years experienced, and a lot of times, sometimes people are doing such a transition while, like, pre-scaler, they were at a place where they were in a, more of a engineering lead or an IC role, and then going to engineering management. The other way around also happens. There's people who have been managing teams for a while. Now they want to sort of kickstart back their career.
Yeah.
They have done that for a while.
Yeah.
And they are great at navigating orgs in a way, and that's a superpower they have, but they want to get back into an IC role. They're also doing that. And we have seen, like, sometimes we pair them up with mentor sessions with some people who are, like, VPs, directors at some companies, for them to at least give them a bit of learning from their time, how they did such switches and all.
Yeah.
That learning is very contextual, but it's super helpful to actually talk to somebody who has either gone from this side to that or that side to this. And
like, a lot of us get our first impression of work, what work should feel like, from our parents. As kids, we see our parents working, and then we get an impression of what work should look like. But the world has changed since we were kids, definitely since I was a kid. And the idea that that you can do what feels great, you don't have to follow a set path,
right,
is getting more and more this thing. You don't have to be a man. Like, in the days when you had one job for your whole life, you would go up that hierarchy and become manager whether you wanted to or not. And now you have enough flexibility that you can be a manager for a little while, go back to precisely what you said, go back to being an IC, take a break, start a company, sell the company or whatever, and go back to taking this thing, completely change your career, become a teacher for a little. You can, all of this. It's like a buffet, You can now design your life. I think in tech, the
ageism is also so much reduced, which makes it possible, because first of all, you don't think a manager and an IC to be hierarchical in that sense. You just think there are different people in the team with different roles. The IC is pushing out the code, the manager is making sure the logistical parts of the things remain in place. You don't need, it's still, I would say there are a lot of traditional places where you might feel a bit awkward if you have ICs in your team who are older than the manager. Still does happen in a lot of places, but many places it has broken down. So
there are enough options now that you don't need to do anything that doesn't align with what you feel. I like it.
It's nice. It's definitely nice. The other thing that I definitely wanted to talk a lot about with you was, like, you wrote this series of posts about politics at workplace, how to learn to wield the political power as well. I absolutely love that you wrote, first of all, you should define what politics is, right? It is a bit of, like, when somebody talks about politics at work, they generally mean the more stigmatized, Machiavellian part of politics. Like you said, my workplace is very political. And where I'm coming from is that what I generally see some of my students as well in teaching, mostly there is an aversion to understand people dynamics itself, and people just stuff it all under the rug of, I don't want to be political. Give me task, I will do it, and I don't want to understand the power dynamics. I don't want to understand, how to sort of, I want to say no, I don't know how to say no. So gets worse to the point that people are like, I will leave this job, I will go somewhere else. Right. To start with, I would say, like, from very young engineers standpoint itself, I would say, not even going into leaders and all. And then obviously I would recommend people to definitely subscribe to the engineering org and read those articles as well, definitely. But just in brief for this setting as well, like, why would you say it's important also, like you have written about it, why would you say it's important for people to know the politics and be able to understand what politics is happening, be able to wield also some of those political powers?
Yeah, sure. Because precisely what you said, right? I think a lot of people became programmers because they liked dealing with these formal systems. And it was their refuge from a kind of messy outside world where perhaps they couldn't deal with other people for whatever reason. Some people are temperamentally so, some people have an environment in which it's difficult. So this would be our, safe space. And we got a lot of pleasure from these formal systems that we were, talking with.
You press a certain key and that's exactly what happens every time.
Yes. And the computer never shouts at you, and it will never negotiate with you, and it won't do a different thing because you ask it nicely. Or so we end up with kind of atrophied skill set on this side of it. More senior you get, the more important this becomes, because for you to get the resources for your team to do its job demands that you negotiate with another human being. And for you to be bad at that negotiation is a disservice you're doing to the people who work for you.
Yeah.
Right? And especially I wanted to break the taboo around talking about politics. Because this negotiation that happens is inherently political. Right? And if you say, I am not political, it means that you will not do any of the actions you will need to do to get better outcomes from this. And saying that people should not be political is a bit weird. And I feel the stigma behind talking about politics is not an accident. It is like a meta-politics by the political operators.
By the people who are politically better.
Yes. And that's why when you think of politician, you think of some slimy guy, some corrupt fellow, and you're like, I can't be this fellow. And that's not an accident either. Meta-politics of it is that don't worry, you shouldn't do politics.
We'll do it.
You leave it to me. Right? I will do the politics. And as you become more and more aware that your outcomes depend on you, like this concept of radical responsibility, then you start to look at all the places where you are getting bad outcomes and what you need to do to improve your outcomes over there. It becomes quite obvious that you need to get better at negotiation and not just negotiation. And sometimes it's like, I remember when I joined Shadi.com, I was so scared to even ask for things. I'd never been in that environment before. And when I finally asked for better computers for the team, Anupam said, what took you so long to, if this was necessary, why didn't you say it earlier? And that's when I realized that a lot of what we think of as negotiation or antagonism or whatever, it's all fake. Even just knowing and having the courage to ask for what you need is a sort of form of politics. Right? And that's one aspect of it, is managing upwards and then managing downwards, right? So it's all, beyond a point, it's all people. The organization is a computer. And the energy flows inside this organization are super important. If they're all going in different directions, you get nothing. But if you can focus them like a magnifying glass focuses the energy of light, sunlight, you can get a conflagration all of a sudden. And this aligning people behind a goal is also a political act, right? It involves storytelling, it involves negotiation, it involves understanding what their needs are, how to align them with all of this. These are all things that programmers don't spend enough time thinking about, and by the time it becomes their job, they have not had any practice. This leads to just less fun, essentially.
And that's also what makes programmers, what you were saying, a bit masochistic and like wanting to suffer.
Correct.
Because you can remove the suffering by probably just maybe a Slack ping itself can remove that suffering, but you'd rather suffer than do that.
This rabbit hole goes deep. And one of the main things I find is consensus building and storytelling. These are also, you can say, political acts, right? Because who knows if that story you're telling is true? It's not a fact.
It's a narrative.
Say, we are going to build the biggest, smartest bus network in the world. Who knows whether you're going to do it or not? But you can tell the story well enough to get 5 people excited about it. It suddenly becomes more possible that you end up doing this. Of course. Right? And so when you're dealing with this range of possibilities, negotiating, building narratives becomes very important. That's basically the focus of my series, is that essentially people don't respond to logic. Someone was telling me that, if I want to convince the business side of things of why, let's say, more time given for testing is better. I'll make a spreadsheet with this list of outcomes and so on and so forth. And I'm like, has that ever worked for you? He's like, you know what works for me? I told him. I said, if I want leadership to buy into something I'm doing, and this is a cancelable take. No, it's not cancelable, but it's not, if I want leadership to do what I'm saying, what I do is I dress well, I turn up in the office when they are there, and I work till late. Because in the end, that is more important than any logic, that they feel that you are like them.
Narratives
drive everything. Yes. Yeah. If they feel that you're on the same side of the table as them, they will allow you to do whatever it is that you want. Someone asked me, I do this coaching thing, so someone asked me like, what do I put in this? I want to hire this guy, he's very expensive, so I've been asked to justify why to hire. What should I put in that? I'm like, I can tell you what to put in that, but the truth of the matter is you should not even be playing this game. You have to get to a point where because I say so is good enough. Now, of course, that's not going to happen on day zero.
On day one, yeah.
But it is possible to get there, but you can't get there without intentionally wanting this to happen and to build this narrative. And you can't build that narrative unless you actually do things. But what happens is the list of facts, like everyone's got this story running in their head. And they will put the facts together in the line which causes the least amount of cognitive dissonance. They will just allow the story to keep unfolding. That's why they say first impressions are so important, because you put together 3-4 dots and now you're going to build the story that has the least amount of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
So how do you shift this so that the narrative that is happening is that this leader is trustworthy?
Right.
This is a big win for a leader because it reduces the negotiation cost of everything. So if you are competent and you have the best interests of the company at heart, then you should be good at storytelling because it is the cheapest way of getting to where you want to get. Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, you were telling about that hiring somebody because I say so kind of thing. Right. I remember something very... something the other way around, like, forcing that trust onto people in a way. At Zomato, once DP said that we were hiring at a very high velocity at some time, and I think the biggest problem was like having a very high hiring bar meant taking a lot of interviews but still not actually filling the headcount that you needed to. And DP said, let's do one thing. Like, obviously, a lot of you people have worked at other places before and you've worked with great people before as well, for sure, right? And then all my team leads, I have a lot of trust on. So for all of my team leads, this 24, 25 people, I have an offer for everybody. You can obviously normally refer people. They will come and do the interviews and all. But you can also do something is you can send any resume to me directly and say that I want to hire this person. And I will have a conversation with them, whatever, salary and all they want, I will discuss with them and we'll roll out an offer. We'll not have a tech round. If you have worked with anybody, you feel like, this person should be here.
Yeah.
Right. For a long time, like after he said that, I think for 2-3 months, there weren't any such referrals because a lot of people also knew that, to suddenly get this trust. Right. It's also very unnatural. Like, okay. But then eventually there were people who did, come through by that mechanism. And it was great because you don't really need to, like, if you already trust somebody, then you can just give them this
absolutely
power out there because they're not going to be bringing any random Tom, Dick, Harry into the company because they know their reputation is riding on that, right?
Absolutely. Like there is a thing called vibe. Like I wrote this piece called How to Build a Kick-Ass Team. And after everything, I can just tell you that the number of times I've hired someone because I know that they are a programmer. That's all I need from people, that you're a programmer, right? And everything about them just says that I love this shit.
Yeah.
Right? And but I will definitely, I didn't start off like that. I used to be terrible at hiring. I couldn't tell who was good at what. And eventually it became very important for me to tell the difference between a good hire and a bad hire. And just by doing it over and over and over again, so I would recommend everyone who's serious about building a team to kind of intentionally train this muscle, because it is then possible to hire, like Deepinder had the confidence that he could look at a person and immediately spot if there were any red flags.
Yeah.
Right? and just be happy based on your recommendation and his interaction with that person, or roll out an offer. This is something that he's confident saying because he knows that if there are any red flags, he will catch them.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a pretty important skill.
Yeah. To a degree, like, I mean, I know that I have worked with you and I've had great time working with you, and that's a great signal anyway.
Sure. Yes,
a lot of times
absolutely.
That's probably 70%, 80% of the thing there. Yeah.
And so we would have a fast track.
Okay.
I would have a normal track, which is if you come to the careers page and upload your CV and all, it would go into a track, but anyone could put something on the fast track, and fast track would get the maximum priority and the best candidate experience and so on and so forth, because this is people reaching out to me on Twitter or coming through a referral from a trusted teammate or so on, and for them we would separate sort of business class candidate experience. You can't offer the same to everyone because it's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So we would have a filtering layer, but once you are on the fast track, you could expect the.
That's obviously, and then by talking about like building that muscle for like quickly figuring out who is who. And that just reminded me of another thing that you have written a lot on Twitter also, and I think there's an article also on the quality muscle. Any advice on that as well? Like, how do you, like, I mean, there's been obviously a lot of debate that goes on Twitter about to have QA or not to have QA, which I feel is like just the surface of the very big boiling pot of
yes.
things to discuss.
There's a lot to talk about here.
Right. Quality, right. How do you like you have a team and quality is important, like where do you like even sow the seeds in that sense, like making, to a degree, a lot of great engineers already have a bit of you'd say queasiness about pushing code which does not meet a certain quality parameter, which is a great thing. Like generally that's a big red flag, green flag for me also in just seeing an engineer, right? Like giving a take-home assignment, the indentation would be great, even if they do not need to.
Yeah.
Right. It would be great because they just
It's
can't.
just there, yeah.
They can't write code unless the indentation is great. Something here will stop them from doing that. Right. It takes deliberate efforts, I believe, to spread that thing across multiple things, not just indentation, but also testing, integration, all of that.
Yes.
Also spreading it across all the members of the team, like everybody thinking it the same way.
Yes.
Are there any sort of pointers into how to make that happen also?
There's a, do you know broken windows theory?
No.
The broken windows theory states that if a neighborhood has one broken window, it will have more broken windows.
Yes, I have heard
Right?
this. Yes, I have heard this.
It is the signs of neglect lead to people also neglecting. In the 80s, New York subway was overridden with crime. And the way they fixed it is every time a subway train came in for the night, they would clean all the graffiti. In the morning, the subway train used to be spanking clean every night. And after a while, crime reduced on the subway. Because when people got into a subway train, it was full of graffiti and months old graffiti. They could tell no one's looking after this thing. Right? And so quality is pretty much the same thing. Like it feels good to work in a high quality code base, delivering a high quality product, right? So why do we not?
It feels like getting into like my experience. Like I've a bunch of times in life, at least 4 or 5 times now has happened that I've joined a place with there's a lot of code base, and like the moment you do a Git checkout and the first look of it, it looks nice. It feels like getting into a BMW or a Mercedes. Exactly, it does not feel like
exactly. This is what I would tell people. I'm like, it's still an open question whether we will own Ferraris in our life.
Yes.
But we can have the experience of excellent engineering by doing it for ourselves. So quality feels great. Then the question to ask is, why do we have poor quality? Obviously, it's a complex problem. But one of the reasons we have poor quality is that there is not enough attention devoted to it. That's essentially what I'm saying. For me, management is essentially the management of attention. There is no thumb rule. Every process, procedure, ritual that you follow can become dead if you're not paying attention while you're doing it. Right? And so when I say that early stage startups shouldn't have QA, it's because the last thing you want is for the developer to not have attention on quality.
It's somebody else's problem, not to think that way.
Yes. And QA is very important when mistakes become expensive. When a mistake is cheap and easy to fix, you're better off having the devs responsible for the quality of what goes out. I'm not saying you don't need QA. I'm saying there is a stage at which they become very useful, right? Still, to this day, testing front ends is a bit of a hit and miss thing, flaky, testing payments. Yes, you need QA. But what I'm saying is that developers can never take their eye off the quality muscle. Right?
I mean, I feel it's trivializing the matter if you turn this into only a debate of whether or not I should have QA, because taking that call won't change the rest of the things, right?
Correct.
I mean, suddenly you have a QA team and you delete it.
Correct.
Or if you don't have a QA team and you had 10 of them, that won't change this part, which is
correct.
Developing the QA, like the quality as part of what you're delivering.
Yes. And the story I want to tell is that quality is a fractal. So I have a story here. This is the story of a rewrite of the Shadi Android app. There's the listing view. And the listing view is complex because depending on who you are and who you're looking at, you can do certain things, right? If you are a paid member looking at a free member, you have different things. If you're a man looking at a woman, you get different things. If you're an NRI, you get a different set of, it's arranged slightly differently for your preferences. If they've blocked you, obviously there are certain things that you can't do, and so on and so forth. If you've never messaged them, if you met, terms and so many conditions, right? And team was like that. And I had a very simple goal. I said, I want them to, the correct answer should just feel great, right? So I said, let's do TDD. And they would keep coming back with interface tests. Slow, would boot up that freaking emulator and start running things. I'm like, this is not testing. How does this feel? It feels terrible. I said, so this is the wrong answer, right? Eventually, I gave them one hint. I said, there is one function whose input is who is looking, and and who are they looking at, and the output is the list of things that they can do. And when they understood this, their eyes lit up. They're like, it is so easy to write the tests for this.
Write the test on the functional interface, not the UI interface.
Exactly, right? Functional core, imperative shell. They got the functional core. They tested the crap out of it. They got this spreadsheet. And now QAs are working like QAs, because QAs, their job is a job of completeness, of knowing every single edge case. So they would give the cases. They would say, this is the desired output. Now that whole team started swarming around this problem. They made a spreadsheet that was more comprehensive than anything any product manager ever wrote to describe how this listing view should work. And the best part is, like, they could just turn that into specs. And if a new case came up, and now the process of delivering quality became pleasurable.
Once you have the harness in place,
yes,
even writing a new test feels like, again, driving a Ferrari kind of thing.
Yes. New members on the team can be trusted to ship on day 0, and the icing on the cake is 6 months later. I walked past because I was fully okay, accepting of the fact that I would need to keep pushing this for it to persist. But 6 months later, I was just randomly walking past one of those Android devs. I said, what are you working on? He said this, and I look at his screen and he's writing tests. He says, we don't work without tests anymore. It is so. We can't imagine how we used to work without tests before. And now this is a team that has become so obsessed with quality, and no one sees quality as someone else's problem. The next thing we did was we built these dashboards, right? It used to take a long time to figure out, like, there would be weekly reports, and in that weekly report you would see a dip, and then you would say, oh, something went wrong with that release, etc. Just this meantime to recognizing there's a problem. We fixed it using dashboards, and now suddenly everyone's like obsessed about quality. If they saw, like, the metrics, there's one unnatural dip somewhere, they'd be like, we messed up. I know already where we messed up. They would fix it. And so the quality muscle generally talks about this, that why is it not pleasurable for you to deliver a high quality product? Why must you depend on, and why must you see it as their responsibility? No, you do as much as you can, and then you need help with, the more egregious edge cases, or testing payments is a pain, or front ends always there's. So you take their help, but no one has the luxury of not thinking about quality.
Now the broken window analogy, because you just mentioned, I actually remembered a story. This was narrated to me by my mother. and I think when she was in college or something, she had gone to Pune, and I think with her cousins or something, and they're walking down a road and they're eating some probably peanuts or chips or something, not remembering exactly, and they threw the packet. They kept walking, and this is Pune from, I guess, 80s, I think. Yeah, it's a beautiful, clean town, and they were in Kolkata. Then from there they had gone, and they're like, we walked down like some 200, 300 meters. We looked back. The entire road, the only thing was our chips packet.
Damn.
We walked back, picked it up, went to the next dustbin, and we threw it up.
If someone had seen them, they would have lectured them also. Because Puneris are like that. They take great pleasure in lecturing you.
But yeah, I think that tells you, like, I mean, end of the day, human behavior, right? I mean, I have seen the same thing, like when I have contributed code back to open source. I've always written tests because everything else was tested. Like if my PR gets merged, it will reduce the coverage by some percent unless I write the test.
Absolutely. There's that percentage of people that will always want to do the right thing. There is that percentage of people who you can count on to always take the easy way out. And then there's the vast majority in the middle.
We'll just follow what's happening.
What's the dominant kind of culture there. And so it's much easier to make changes at orgs than it seems like, because you just need to tip like that critical mass over into the correct way of working, and then everyone just follows suit.
Yeah. Nice. And for everybody listening, I definitely recommend that building the quality muscle. That's an article I really loved because, I mean, I read it. I was like, it's about like building muscle. Once you have that, then you don't need to put further efforts into it, which is
it just becomes a habit.
So really nice. But I guess for the leaders, for the people like the engineering managers and all, to get started, it will take some effort, consensus building, all of that initially.
Yes.
But once that push has been done, the rest of it is more
it's
natural.
always, all of this is very contextual. It depends on how much of a acceptance there is that the current way of doing things is not working. Right. Some people are in denial. They feel, if you guys just worked harder, or if you weren't so interested in, only getting off on your technical fun and cared about the business. All of these accusations are often leveled against engineering teams, right? That they are not skillful, that they are lazy, that they don't care about the wrong things, right? But eventually there is an acceptance that the way everything is happening is wrong, and that perhaps everyone is part of the problem, right? And when that acceptance happens, that's when real transformational change can this thing. Someone once asked me, how do you improve quality of a product? How do we get better quality? And I said there are two ways to increase quality. One is by spending 10x more than you already were, or through a transformational change of everything that you do inside the company. Words to that effect.
I think the spending 10x route is closed now. In this economy, I think the plan B is the only way.
And like the other thing you said, that teams grew during the bull market. There was a lot of pre-PMF companies that suddenly got post-PMF teams.
Right.
And post-PMF teams require post-PMF styles of management.
Right.
And they are necessarily, when you have such a big team, you're more about locking in on a direction and going full blast at executing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the size of momentum which you can turn around too fast, right?
Yes. Because keeping everybody informed and aligned on what we are working on becomes expensive when you have like 70% people in your team.
Yeah.
And so a lot of pre-PMF companies ended up in post-PMF organization structures, which made it even more elusive for them to find PMF. And every time I've looked at these, or rather the number of times I've learned this lesson, that the team's size is like, you have to be very, very careful about growing the team.
Yeah.
And I've learned this lesson over and over again, at just how effective small teams can be.
Yeah.
As compared to, we seriously underestimate. Or
a post-PMF company with a pre-PMF org structure is way better actually.
Yes, exactly.
The other way around.
Exactly.
Another thing because we were talking about like, the sort of in the politics piece also, like how do you sort of bring about change also, and you need to build those narratives and all. Something which I have noticed during some of my like short-term more consulting gigs is that, and if I look back at like, I mean, earlier times I've mostly like picked up a like paid for X hours of code kind of consulting as a junior that you do. And later on I have sometimes consulted on a friend startup to sort of part of their engineering team had left, like 5 people out of 8 had left, rebuild that kind of things. As also I've helped out people. One thing I've realized is that it's very important to understand that the intervention that you're doing, is it execution level, strategy level, or philosophy level? Because all three are very different. Like,
yes.
Like an execution level intervention, if you're doing, then you also need to let go of, or you have to go all in on the strategy and philosophy in place.
Yes.
If you think the philosophy is wrong, then try to intervene there. But if you think philosophy is wrong,
you
won't. Yeah, you will never be convinced yourself to work on the execution piece if you are already convinced the philosophy is wrong.
Sure.
Right. So I think
you can't argue with the captain of the ship.
Huh.
Right. You can say, I don't think this is a good decision, but if captain says orders are orders, then orders are orders. You've got your marching orders, you march. The only thing you can do is quit if you're that much not aligned with the philosophy on the execution level.
I think in the team, it's also important, like whether you are like an individual contributor or like, you're a PM or a EM. I think you understand also like whether your task is cut out for execution, for strategy, or for philosophy. And yeah, I think, I mean, if a layer above you don't agree, right? You don't agree with the philosophy and you're tasked with execution. Yeah. If you don't agree that much, I think, you'll have to quit. Sure. But if you think that you can align yourself to a degree, then you will have to run with it.
Yeah. Or like, it's your money, it's your this thing, you're paying me for an execution outcome, I will do it.
Yeah. You tell me like input and out, like very much like TDD then.
Yeah.
You tell me the input, give me the output, and I will execute in the best possible productivity possible because you're paying me for that.
Sure. But once you swallow the idea that everything is up for negotiation, it becomes harder and harder to just obey, because you'll be like, with a small change to the strategy, we could just do so much better. And I guess then what happens is you stop taking on the execution-oriented assignments and move towards the strategy and philosophy ones.
And as you're going up through the ladder in teams as well, like I think identifying also what place you can intervene is also very important, right? I mean,
a lot of people think they'll be happy as ICs because they don't have to manage people. But they don't realize that IC often is management hard mode because you need to influence without authority.
Yeah.
Like you have no formal authority, but the success of the project depends on you making sure that things happen in a particular way.
Yeah, that has, I think, been probably like so many people got interested into product management last few years. And then at least if anybody asked me advice on moving from engineering to product, I would tell them the same thing. I'm like, if you probably are an EM, you still, you have some command and control kind of mechanism in place.
Yes.
You should not abuse it, but you still have that in place.
Yes.
As a PM, you have zero command and control authority anywhere, right? And then narrative is your only weapon.
Yes.
how well can you wield it? Are you confident?
Yeah.
And that's important to also know your own, I think, strengths and weaknesses around.
Sure.
Getting influencers on board and everything.
I might be biased though, but I think EMs will make great PMs.
Yeah.
I think in general, the problem with product management is that they know the value of everything, but the cost of nothing. And so having PMs is essentially, this is the thing that makes a PM a pleasure to work with, is that they can understand what is the cost of various outcomes. And they will
I think that's also the reason I have seen in engineers like the ICs, they do respect PMs a lot who have had a IC or an EM background before, because they trust the fact that this person knows the cost.
Yeah.
Because if you don't trust that, then you don't want to deliver the value to them, because you don't really know whether this person knew the cost at which I delivered the value to them.
Right.
That trust is very important.
Right.
Absolutely. One final question to sort of wrap up things is, these days, and then we were just talking about it before starting as well, like generative AI, LLMs, and all of that coming in, right? While I believe like most of the changes have been gradual, but couple of releases last few months have made people think it's kind of a hype and all. Younger folks in engineering are starting out their career right now. I see a lot of them being a little worried, like, will this take my job away? Which is sort of obviously the scratching the surface level question. But like I think using GitHub Copilot gives you superpowers. A lot of people, so people are figuring out where these things would help and all. What's your worldview on this? People starting out their careers in tech. Anything to be wary of? Anything not to be wary of?
Well, Groucho Marx said, never predict, especially about the future. Right? So I'm not going to predict about the future. But I'm going to just lean on the fact that in the past, every time some earth-shattering new technology came out, like we don't remember it anymore. Right? That this was so like the spinning jenny, the industrial mills were like an earth shatter, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and so it somehow the human race just went on. And you might say, no, it's different this time. There's a thing called a singularity, and we are approaching that singularity moment and whatnot. I'm like, there's limited value in me worrying about what will happen after the singularity.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Maybe society will just become so awesome that no one needs to worry about survival anymore. Yeah. Maybe that's what we do with the singularity. In the meantime, enjoy your life, right? Yeah. Just do the engineering or do what feels meaningful to you in the moment. And I would say that if you are excited by AI or you're very frightened, if your reaction to it is very extreme, you should probably quit your job and dive into AI, right? If you're feeling that much anxiety or that much excitement about it, just go do it, man. Yeah. As they say, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. If you feel AI is your enemy, like just go and understand it deeply and see what you can do with it. In the end, I feel that like the world largely reflects us back to ourselves. And so if you have a lot of fear and anxiety about AI, you will see yourself.
The things which are going.
Yeah. And so do whatever you need to deal with the anxiety. Personally, I believe that as a species, we are extremely resilient. And also we have so many problems, so many planet level problems that
if some are offloaded to AI, then great.
Yeah, you can't really make plans based on, these the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Right?
Makes sense.
You still got to wake up and do the job of living day to day. And it cannot be that you are overwhelmed by the problems we are facing. And AI is just one of those, which, unlike global warming, has the potential to do good as well.
Nice. Thank you once
Thanks,
again
Arnav.
for like a great set of answers. I think lots of things for me to learn as well, definitely. And absolutely looking forward to the Sabbatical handbook.
Yeah. I promise it will be out soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.